Why did I let it get this far? I whispered to myself, my hands trembling as I looked at the mess around me. My name is Tara Smith, and I'm 28, an accountant by day, a daughter by blood, but I'm about to unravel the lies that have been controlling me. What happens next? Let's just say things are far from what they seem, and the truth is more dangerous than anyone expects. It was a Tuesday morning in Indianapolis when I first got the call. The phone rang, and I saw my mom's name flash across the screen. I had been looking forward to this family cruise for months. It was supposed to be our first vacation together in years. Me, my parents, my younger sister, Emma, and a few other relatives. I had carefully saved up for it, picking up extra shifts at my accounting firm to afford my ticket. I had packed new summer clothes, anticipating the laughter, the sun, and the rare chance for all of us to reconnect. "Hello?" I answered, my voice still tinged with excitement from the plans ahead. "Tara. Grandma's not doing well," my mom's voice crackled through the phone. The words hit me with the sharp sting of worry. "She's in the hospital, sweetheart. You need to come home." I paused, feeling the weight of her words sink in. Grandma had always been there for me. She was more than family, she was my anchor, the one who'd given me advice when I felt lost, the one who had always been proud of my every achievement. My mind raced, and the excitement I'd felt moments ago was suddenly replaced with the cold chill of fear. "Of course I'll come. Don't worry about the cruise, Mom. Family comes first," I said without hesitation, my heart already starting to race as I thought about what could have happened to her. As I drove to the hospital, my thoughts kept spinning in circles. Was she really that sick? Why hadn't anyone told me sooner? The uncertainty gnawed at me. I could almost hear my mom's voice, the way she'd spoken, heavy with what I now realized was a kind of false concern, as though rehearsed. I thought of the cruise, of the time I had spent preparing for it, the anticipation. It seemed so trivial now. I pulled my car into the hospital parking lot, my hands trembling slightly as I checked my phone. I hadn't seen a message from Emma yet, which was odd since we usually kept in touch about everything. Maybe she was already at the hospital, helping Mom? But before I could send a message to check, I got a notification, a post from Emma on social media. My heart stopped in my chest as I clicked on the post. "Best vacation ever," the caption screamed from the screen. The photo showed the entire family, all smiling and laughing, with champagne glasses raised in celebration. There they were, Mom, Dad, Emma, aunts, uncles, all on the deck of the cruise ship, soaking up the sun. But I wasn't in the picture. The cruise that was supposed to be our first family getaway in years, the one I'd been so excited about, was happening right now, without me. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking as I stared at the screen. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. How could they lie to me like this, using Grandma's illness as an excuse to manipulate me into staying behind? My mind spun in disbelief and a pit formed in my stomach. I quickly turned the car around and drove straight to Grandma's house. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought I might snap it. What was I even going to say to her when I got there? Was Grandma truly sick? And if she wasn't, why would they do this? The questions echoed in my mind, drowning out everything else. When I arrived at her house, the lights were on, and the familiar scent of lavender drifted from the door as it opened. Grandma stood there, looking as calm and healthy as I had ever seen her. The shock must have been evident on my face because she immediately reached out, pulling me into a tight hug. "Tara, sweetheart, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft and comforting. I almost broke down right there, but I managed to steady myself. I stepped back and wiped my eyes, taking a deep breath before speaking. "Grandma, they lied to me. They lied about you being sick. I saw the post." My voice wavered, but I couldn't stop myself from saying it. "They're on the cruise. They used you as an excuse to leave me behind." Grandma's expression shifted, and for the first time in all the years I had known her, I saw a flicker of anger in her eyes. She pulled me into the living room, sitting me down as I tried to make sense of everything. "I didn't ask them to do this, Tara," she said quietly. "Your mother called me last week. She wanted me to play along. She asked me to pretend I was in the hospital if you came by. I refused." My mind was spinning. It wasn't just the cruise, it was everything. The way they had treated me, the way they had always favored Emma, I had always tried to be the responsible daughter, the one who could be counted on when things got tough. But this felt like a betrayal on a level I hadn't been prepared for. Why? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Why would they do this to me? Grandma's face softened, her eyes full of something I couldn't quite place. She reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly firm despite her age. Sometimes people show you exactly who they are, even when they think they're hiding it, she said, her voice steady, wise. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? Her words hung in the air, settling into my chest like a cold weight. What could I do? I had always tried to stay true to who I was, to be the one who kept the family together, who helped when no one else would. But now everything felt so broken, so warped. I glanced down at my phone again, expecting more messages from Emma or my parents. Instead, another message from my cousin Nina popped up in the group chat. A photo of them all, laughing, enjoying their time together. It stung even more, seeing the blatant exclusion in their smiles. But Grandma had said something that would stay with me. What are you going to do with that knowledge? I didn't know the answer yet, but I knew that things had changed. And no matter how much I wished I could escape this new reality, I couldn't. The truth had finally come crashing down. The days that followed were a blur. I spent most of my time at Grandma's house, pacing back and forth, running over the events in my mind, again and again. What had happened? How had they come to this point? I wanted answers, but each time I asked myself, why, I only came up with more questions. I kept replaying the conversation with Grandma in my head. What are you going to do with that knowledge? Those words haunted me, echoing through my thoughts like an alarm. It was as though something inside me had shifted. For the first time, I didn't feel like the passive observer, the one who took what was handed to her. I felt like I had a choice. To take action, to stand up, to stop being the one who always took a back seat in this family. But it wasn't easy. My mind was a battlefield of emotions. I was angry, furious even, but there was also a part of me that felt deeply hurt. How could they have done this to me? How could they have used me as a pawn in their selfish game? The betrayal stung more than anything else I had ever felt. And yet, there was another part of me that felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, the mask had fallen. Finally, I could see my family for who they really were. But what did I do with that knowledge? How could I move forward from this point? I sat in Grandma's cozy living room, staring out the window at the quiet suburban street. The leaves outside were beginning to change color, signaling the start of autumn. It should have been a peaceful moment, but my thoughts were a whirlwind. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, pulling me from my reverie. I glanced down at the screen. It was a message from Emma. My heart skipped a beat, and I hesitated before opening it. I already knew what was coming. Why are you doing this, Tara? You're making everything so much worse. Mom says you're spreading lies about us. We're just trying to be happy and you're ruining it. The words hit me hard. I felt my blood pressure rise, my palms begin to sweat. Ruining it? They were the ones who had ruined everything, and now they were trying to turn the tables, trying to make me feel like I was the problem. I wanted to scream in frustration, but instead I sat there staring at the screen, wondering what to do next. I took a deep breath and responded, my fingers trembling as I typed. It's not lies, Emma. You don't get to keep lying to me and then act like I'm the villain. You and Mom used Grandma, used me, and now you're just pretending like nothing happened. I won't let it slide anymore. I hit send and immediately regretted it. What if Emma blocked me? What if she told Mom, and they turned everyone against me? The fear was there, lurking beneath the anger, but I knew deep down that I couldn't go back. This had to be said. The phone rang a few minutes later. It was my dad. I hesitated for a moment before answering. My heart was pounding in my chest, my throat dry. Tara, we need to talk. His voice was cold, flat. It had none of the warmth or concern that I had expected. It was as though he had already decided I was the enemy. About what? I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could hear the edge of bitterness creeping in. You've made a mess of things. You need to take down that post. You're embarrassing the family. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of disappointment settle over me. Embarrassing the family? No. It wasn't me who was embarrassing the family. It was them, for everything they had done to me, to Grandma, to everyone else. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I wanted to say something, anything that would make him understand, but I didn't know if it was even worth it. "I'm not taking it down," I said, my voice firm, despite the tremor of doubt that lingered in the back of my mind. "You can't silence me anymore, Dad. You can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. This is who you really are, and I'm done being your scapegoat." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought he had hung up. Then his voice came through, lower and more menacing. "If you don't take that post down, Tara, you'll regret it. You have no idea what's at stake here. You're playing with fire." My breath caught in my throat. The threat in his voice was unmistakable, and for a split second I felt the familiar pang of fear. But then I remembered Grandma's words. "Stand your ground. You've done nothing wrong." I wasn't going to back down this time. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "You're not going to intimidate me." The call ended abruptly and I sat there, my phone still pressed against my ear, feeling a strange mixture of emotions. Fear, relief, anger. But more than anything, I felt a spark of something new. Determination. This was it. There was no going back now. I looked at Grandma, who had been sitting quietly by the window watching the entire exchange with a calm expression on her face. "They're still trying to make me the bad guy," I said, almost to myself. Grandma met my gaze, her eyes steady and unflinching. "They always will. But you don't have to play by their rules anymore." Her words gave me strength, more than I had ever expected. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone in this. I had the truth on my side, and I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. I took another deep breath, trying to steady the storm inside me. The next steps were unclear, but one thing was certain: I wasn't going to let this go, not now, not ever. The truth was out. The cruise wasn't just a vacation. It was the beginning of something much bigger. The beginning of everything unraveling. And as much as I dreaded what was to come, I couldn't deny the sense of power that surged through me. This time, I would be the one calling the shots. The days after my conversation with Dad felt like an eternity. Every time I looked at my phone, I half expected another message or call from someone in my family, but nothing came through. Not from Emma, not from my mom. It was as if they had vanished, their silence ringing louder than their words ever could. I spent my time at Grandma's house going over the paperwork she had given me. It was thick, filled with bank statements, photos, and handwritten notes. Proof of what I had always felt but never truly understood. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial, systematic, calculated. My parents had been manipulating the situation for years, using me as a pawn in their game, and Emma, their golden child, was at the center of it all, wrapped in their deceit. I couldn't fathom how they had managed to do this for so long without anyone noticing. How had I been so blind? The thought of confronting them face to face filled me with dread. But at the same time, a fire had been lit inside me that I couldn't extinguish. Grandma had always been the voice of reason, the calm in the storm, but now, with this newfound knowledge, I felt like I was standing at the edge of something I couldn't walk away from. It was mid-afternoon when the doorbell rang. I hadn't been expecting anyone, but I wasn't surprised when I saw Grandma answer the door. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw her tense when the visitor walked inside. Uncle Michael, my dad's brother. I had always known him to be the quiet, thoughtful one, the one who kept to the sidelines while my parents ran the show. But today his face was drawn, his eyes tired, as though he had been carrying a weight for far too long. "Tara," he said, his voice low, "we need to talk." I didn't say anything at first, I just stood there, watching him. His presence brought an unexpected wave of comfort. For the first time in a while, I didn't feel entirely alone in this fight. Maybe Uncle Michael had seen what had been happening all these years. Maybe he understood more than I had realized. "Come sit," Grandma said, her voice soft but firm, guiding us to the living room. "We have much to discuss." I sat down, my hands resting on my lap, feeling the tension building in the room. Uncle Michael cleared his throat, then opened the folder he had been carrying, placing it on the table between us. The thick stack of documents seemed to weigh more than anything I had ever held. It was filled with the same evidence Grandma had shown me, but now it had more, a deeper, darker truth. "Everything I've sent you," he began, his voice shaking slightly. It's the proof we need. Your parents, they've been taking money from your trust for years, not just Emma's college or her dance lessons, but everything. They've been siphoning off funds meant for you and funneling it into their own pockets. They've been using Emma to cover their tracks, manipulating her just like they did with you. They've been embezzling. I felt the air leave my lungs. I wanted to say something, to shout, to scream, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just stared at the documents, bank transfers, wire reports, withdrawal slips, all damning evidence of the years of deceit. How much? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question was out before I could even stop myself. It didn't matter what the amount was. I already knew it was going to be too much. Too much for me to ever forgive. Too much for me to ignore. A lot, Uncle Michael replied, his eyes darkening. Too much. More than they ever told you. I looked over at Grandma, my gaze searching for any hint of the woman who had always been the calm in the chaos, but now there was a fire in her eyes. She was still the same person, but something had changed in her too. It was as though she had been waiting for this moment all along, silently preparing for the storm that was about to come. They thought they could get away with it, she said, her voice steady. They thought you wouldn't notice. But Tara, this isn't just about the money. This is about everything they've done to you. The lies, the manipulation, the favoritism. It's time for all of it to come to light. I nodded, my fingers clenching into fists. The anger I had been trying to suppress finally boiled to the surface, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to feel it. I had always been the one who kept my head down, the one who tried to keep the peace. But now, I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. I wasn't going to let them make me feel small or insignificant. What are we going to do? I asked, looking between Grandma and Uncle Michael. The question was simple, but the answer was anything but. We need to confront them, Uncle Michael said, his voice firm but filled with uncertainty. But we need to be careful. They'll try to cover it up. They'll try to intimidate you, Tara. You're dealing with people who've been hiding the truth for years. Grandma nodded. But this time, we have the truth on our side, and we're not backing down. The weight of their words sank in, and I realized that there was no turning back. It was time to take control, to stand up for myself, for the years of neglect and mistreatment. But how could I face my parents after everything they had done? How could I look them in the eye and not feel the hurt that had been building for years? I wasn't sure what the next steps would be, but I knew that I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had already been silenced by them for far too long. I'm ready, I said, my voice stronger than I had ever felt. Let's do this. Uncle Michael glanced at Grandma, and she gave him a small, approving nod. Then it's time, he said quietly. Time to take everything back. And just like that, I knew. This was the beginning of the end. The truth would come out, and no matter what happened, I would never let them hurt me again. The days that followed were filled with a sense of urgency, but also a growing unease. I kept replaying everything in my mind, over and over again, every conversation, every lie, every moment of neglect. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. How had my parents gotten away with it for so long? And why hadn't I noticed it before? At Grandma's house, the tension was palpable. I could feel the weight of the documents Uncle Michael had brought over hanging in the air. They weren't just pages of paper anymore. They were proof of everything that had been kept hidden, proof of the betrayal that had been simmering beneath the surface for so many years. We need to be smart about this, Uncle Michael said one afternoon, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. He was pacing back and forth, his brow furrowed. If we go to them without being prepared, they'll twist everything. They'll lie, threaten, manipulate. You know how they are. I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. The thought of confronting my parents felt like a mountain I wasn't sure I could climb, but I had no choice. This had to happen. I had to face them. I had to take back what was rightfully mine. That evening, I sat at Grandma's kitchen table, the papers spread out in front of me. The evidence was irrefutable. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every misappropriation of funds was documented. I could feel the weight of it, pressing down on me, urging me to act. Do you think they'll ever admit it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't asking for reassurance. I was asking for the truth. Could I even expect an apology, or would they deny everything to the very end? Grandma looked at me, her expression calm but resolute. "They will never admit it willingly," she said quietly. "People like them don't admit their mistakes. They try to bury them. But you have something they can't hide anymore. Proof. You have the truth on your side, Tara, and that's more powerful than any lie they can." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words sink in. It wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about making them see the error of their ways. It was about standing up for myself, for the years of manipulation, for the lies that had been fed to me. This was bigger than just money. It was about reclaiming my own dignity, my worth. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing. What would it be like, sitting across from my parents, knowing what I knew? How could I ever look them in the eye again, knowing the extent of their betrayal? I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, mixing with a deep sense of betrayal. But there was also something else, a quiet determination, a feeling that had been building inside me ever since Grandma had shared the documents with me. I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me into silence. The next morning, we gathered at Grandma's house to plan our next move. Uncle Michael had made arrangements for a private meeting with a lawyer, someone who could guide us through the process of confronting my parents and making sure that the evidence would stand up in court. He was calm, collected, everything I wasn't. I was a bundle of nerves, but I knew this was the only way forward. "We're going to approach this carefully," Uncle Michael explained. "We're going to make sure we have all our ducks in a row before we confront them. If we go in unprepared, they'll turn the tables and accuse you of making everything up." I nodded, trying to focus, trying to calm my racing heart. The idea of confronting my parents still felt impossible, but I knew I had no other choice. If I didn't take action now, they would continue to hurt me, and they would continue to get away with it. The lawyer arrived shortly after, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah, who had experience dealing with family disputes and financial crimes. She sat down with us and began going over the documents, her brow furrowing as she reviewed each page. "This is solid," she said after a few minutes. "If you're prepared to take this to court, this evidence is more than enough to build a case. But we need to make sure they don't get the chance to destroy anything before you confront them." "Destroy the evidence?" I asked, my voice shaky. The thought of them tearing apart everything I had worked so hard to gather, everything that could finally give me closure, made my stomach turn. "They've been doing it for years," Sarah said. "They're going to try to get rid of anything they think might incriminate them. But if we act quickly, we can stop them. You need to go to them and confront them before they can cover their tracks." I nodded, a cold chill running down my spine. The thought of walking into that room, facing my parents and telling them that I knew everything, was terrifying. But it was also liberating. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let them dictate the terms of my existence. Later that day, I called my parents. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number. I almost didn't want to hear the phone ring, almost didn't want to face the reality that this moment had arrived. But I had to. I had to do this for myself. "Hello?" My mom's voice came through, as cold and distant as I remembered it. I took a deep breath before speaking. "Mom," I began, my voice steady but filled with the weight of everything I had uncovered. "We need to talk. I know what you and Dad have been doing. I know about the trust fund, the money, everything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, then the click of her teeth as she snapped at someone in the background. "What are you talking about, Tara?" I clenched my fists, trying to keep the anger in check. "You're not getting away with this anymore. I have the proof, the documents, the bank statements, everything." The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then, finally, my mother spoke again, her voice trembling with a mixture of fury and fear. "Don't you dare accuse us of that, Tara," she said, her voice rising. "You have no idea what you're talking about." But I knew. I knew everything. And this time, I wasn't afraid. "It's over," I said, my voice firm and resolute. "I'm done being manipulated. You can't silence me anymore." And with that, the battle lines were drawn. There was no turning back. I had taken the first step, and I wasn't going to stop until the truth came out, no matter the cost. The days after my phone call with my mom felt like an eternity. I hadn't heard from her or my dad, and that silence was deafening. Part of me expected them to call, to apologize, to offer some excuse for their behavior, but as time passed, I realized that they were doing what they always did, sweeping everything under the rug, hoping I would forget. But I wasn't going to forget. I couldn't. At Grandma's house, I spent my time with Uncle Michael and Sarah, going over every detail of the case. The lawyer had made it clear that we were about to take on something much bigger than a family dispute. This was about financial fraud, manipulation, and years of deceit. If we were going to win, we needed to be prepared for the fallout. I was terrified. The thought of exposing everything, of putting my family's dirty laundry on display for the world to see, felt like a betrayal in itself. But then I would remember how they had treated me, how they had used me for years. And I knew what I had to do. "We need to do this soon," Sarah said one afternoon, flipping through the evidence. "The longer we wait, the more time they have to cover their tracks." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I could see the nervousness in Uncle Michael's eyes as well. He had always been the quiet one, the one who kept his distance from the family drama. But now he was in the thick of it, and I could tell that this was just as painful for him as it was for me. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, his voice hesitant. "It's going to be hard, Tara. They're not going to take this well." "I have no choice," I said, my voice firm. "They've already made their choice. Now it's my turn." That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung over me. I stared at the documents spread out on the table in front of me. It was all there. Every transaction, every lie, every stolen penny. I ran my fingers over the papers, as if somehow hoping that the truth would be enough to make everything right. But I knew better. The truth had never been enough to stop them before. The next morning, I woke up early, feeling a sense of finality. Today was the day. I had arranged a meeting with my parents. Sarah, Uncle Michael, and Grandma would be there to support me. It was time to face them, to confront them, to make them see that I wasn't the naive daughter they could control anymore. As I walked to the car, my stomach was in knots. I wasn't sure if I was more afraid of what they would say or what I would do if they tried to deny it all. The last thing I wanted was a confrontation, but I wasn't going to back down. When we arrived at the meeting spot, a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, my heart was racing. I could see my parents sitting at a corner table, looking more composed than I had expected. Mom was sitting with her arms crossed, her expression hard, while Dad kept glancing at his watch, as if he couldn't wait to get this over with. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Uncle Michael asked as we walked toward the table. He was standing close behind me, but I could hear the hesitation in his voice. "I'm sure," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. We approached the table, and for a moment, I felt the overwhelming urge to turn around, to run away and pretend none of this was happening. But I didn't. I couldn't. "Mom, Dad," I said, sitting down across from them. My voice was calm, but the anger simmering beneath the surface was hard to hide. "We need to talk." My mom didn't say anything, she just stared at me, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. Dad, on the other hand, spoke first. "About what, Tara?" he asked, his tone clipped, as if he already knew where this was going. "I know what you've been doing," I said, looking directly at both of them. My heart was pounding, but I refused to look away. "I know about the money, the trust fund, the lies. I have the proof." The room went silent. For a moment it felt like time had stopped, like the world was holding its breath. Then my mom let out a scoffing laugh. "Proof?" she said, her voice laced with disbelief. "What are you talking about? You're accusing us of something ridiculous. There's no proof. You don't know what you're talking about." I took a deep breath and placed the stack of documents in front of them. My fingers were trembling, but I didn't let it show. "I know about every transaction. I know how much money you've been taking from my trust. I know about the withdrawals, the transfers, everything." My mom's expression changed, but not in the way I expected. There was no guilt, no remorse. Instead, her face flushed with anger and she slammed her hand down on the table. "You're crazy," she spat. "You're out of your mind if you think we did anything wrong. Your father and I worked hard to give you everything you have. Everything we did was for you, Tara. Don't you understand that? No, I said, shaking my head. You didn't do it for me. You did it for yourselves. You took from my future, from my trust, and you used it to fund your own lives. You used me as an excuse to cover up your greed, your manipulation. Dad finally spoke up, his voice cold and threatening. You have no idea what you're talking about, Tara. This is none of your business. You've always been difficult, always questioning everything. You think you can come in here and ruin everything we've built? You're making a huge mistake. The venom in his voice stung, but it didn't shake me. I was done being afraid. I'm not ruining anything. I'm exposing the truth. The truth you've been hiding from everyone, including me. And now it's time for you to face the consequences. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I was resolute. For the first time, I felt like I was standing in my own power. I wasn't just confronting them. I was taking back everything they had tried to steal from me. I glanced at Uncle Michael and Grandma who were sitting nearby, their eyes filled with support. I could feel their strength behind me, and it made me feel like I wasn't alone in this. The moment was heavy, the weight of the truth almost suffocating, but it had to be said. We're going to take this to court, I said, my voice unwavering. And I'm not backing down. My mom's face paled, and Dad's jaw clenched as he stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back. He looked like he might explode, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I'm done with you, he spat, his voice full of rage. You've chosen your side. You'll regret this. But I didn't regret it. And I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The truth would come out, and it was only a matter of time before they had to face the consequences of their actions. The aftermath of that confrontation hung in the air like a thick fog. As soon as my parents stormed out of the cafe, leaving behind a trail of tension and unfinished accusations, I sat there for a moment, frozen. The adrenaline of speaking the truth, of finally standing up for myself, was beginning to fade, and what was left in its wake was the cold reality of what was to come. They weren't going to back down easily. I knew that, but for the first time I felt a sense of control that I hadn't felt in years. The fight had only just begun, but it had already started to shift the power back into my hands. Uncle Michael and Grandma were quiet, watching me carefully, waiting for me to speak. I could feel their eyes on me, filled with concern and pride. It was as if they were waiting for me to process what had just happened, to give voice to the storm of emotions I was feeling. I took a deep breath and finally spoke. It's not over, is it? My voice was steady, but I could feel my insides churning with a mix of fear and exhilaration. No, Tara, Uncle Michael said softly. This is just the beginning. They're not going to give up without a fight, but you have the truth on your side, and that's a powerful thing. Grandma's hand rested gently on mine, her touch warm and comforting. You did the right thing, she said, her voice low but firm. You stood up for yourself, for everything they've taken from you. You're not just fighting for the money. They've stolen more than that. They've stolen your peace, your trust, and that's what you're taking back. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. They were right. This was bigger than money. It was about the years of manipulation, the lies, the unfairness. It was about everything I had put up with, quietly bearing the weight of their favoritism, their deceit. And now, it was time to make it stop. The next few days were a blur of meetings, paperwork, and legal preparations. Sarah, the lawyer, had been working tirelessly to ensure that we had everything in order. She was sharp, efficient, and unflinching, and she made it clear that we were ready to take this to court. But it wasn't just about the legal fight. It was about the emotional toll, the strain it would place on me, on all of us. I spent hours going through the documents again and again, making sure I knew every detail. It was almost like I was living in two worlds, one where I was fighting for justice, and another where I was still the daughter who had been betrayed, still the woman who was struggling to reconcile the truth with the family she had known all her life. The hardest part was the guilt. Even though I knew what they had done was wrong, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was breaking something that could never be repaired. I had never wanted to tear my family apart. But at the same time, I knew that if I didn't act now, if I didn't stand firm, nothing would ever change. My silence, my passivity, had allowed them to keep pushing me aside, to keep taking One night, after another round of legal consultations, I sat in Grandma's living room, staring out the window at the darkened sky. The quiet was almost overwhelming, and I could feel the weight of the decision I had made pressing down on me. Just as I was starting to sink into my thoughts, my phone buzzed. I glanced down, expecting another text from Emma, maybe some sort of apology or demand for me to take the post down, to back off. But instead, it was a call from my mom. I hesitated before answering, my heart racing. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep my distance from her. But I knew that avoiding this conversation wouldn't make it go away. The silence between us had been unbearable, and the tension was only growing. I answered the call, my voice calm but guarded. "Hello? Why are you doing this, Tara?" My mom's voice came through the phone, strained and shaky. There was a hint of desperation in her tone, something I hadn't heard before. It almost sounded like she was trying to regain control, but it was too late for that. "I'm not doing anything, Mom. I'm just telling the truth. You and Dad have been lying for years, using me and Grandma, and now it's all coming out. You can't hide it anymore." I said the words with a firmness I hadn't known I possessed. "I didn't want any of this," she said, her voice breaking. "We did it because we thought it was best for you. You were too young to handle that kind of money. We were saving you from yourself." "From myself?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You've been taking my money and manipulating me my whole life, and now you want me to believe you were saving me? No, Mom, this wasn't about me. It was about you. About Emma. About what you wanted." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her struggling to find the words, but she wasn't going to apologize. I didn't expect her to. "Please, Tara," she said after a moment, her voice softer now, pleading. "You don't understand. You don't know everything that's happened. We did what we thought was best. You can't just throw away your family like this." My heart clenched as I listened to her words. She wasn't even admitting what she had done. She was still trying to paint herself as the victim, trying to make me feel guilty for confronting her. But I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. "I'm not throwing away my family, Mom. You and Dad are doing that. You've been doing it for years, but I'm done. I'm done being your scapegoat. I'm done letting you control me." I could hear her inhale sharply, as if she were about to say something else, but instead there was just silence. "Goodbye, Mom," I said quietly, and then I hung up. The silence that followed felt like a weight lifting off my chest. I didn't feel relief exactly, but I felt something else, strength. I had just made the hardest decision of my life, and I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to let them keep making excuses. I wasn't going to let them keep hurting me. I looked over at Grandma, who had been sitting quietly by my side, watching the entire conversation unfold. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were filled with approval. "You did what you needed to do," she said softly. "And you did it for the right reasons. You're not alone in this, Tara." I nodded, but there was no time to dwell on the conversation. The next steps were coming fast, and the fight was far from over. But for the first time, I felt like I had the power to face whatever came next. The truth was out there now, and nothing could take it back. The next few days were filled with a surreal calm, like the calm before the storm. I had confronted my parents, I had made my stand, and now all I could do was wait. The legal paperwork was being prepared, and Uncle Michael, with the help of Sarah, had been gathering the necessary evidence to file a case. But despite the clarity of my actions, there was an uneasiness gnawing at me. The feeling that things weren't over. They had barely begun. I sat at Grandma's kitchen table, staring at the pile of papers in front of me. The weight of the truth was heavy, but it wasn't the truth itself that kept me up at night. It was the consequences. The consequences that my family was about to face. The consequences I had forced them into, whether I liked it or not. I had expected resistance, but not the type of resistance that was coming. I hadn't anticipated just how far my parents would go to protect their image, to hide their lies, and even though I had prepared myself for everything, threats, manipulation, denial, nothing could have prepared me for the call I received 2 days after the meeting. It was a Saturday afternoon when my phone rang. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but there was something about it that made my heart skip a beat. Hesitating only for a second, I answered it. "Hello? Tara?" My father's voice came through, cold and sharp. It sent a shiver down my spine. You've made a huge mistake, a mistake that's going to cost you more than you can imagine. I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. This was it. The first real threat. What do you want, Dad? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You've already crossed a line, he continued, his voice getting more venomous with each word. But if you don't take down that post, and if you don't back off from this legal action, I promise you, you'll regret it. My pulse quickened, but I stood my ground. I'm not taking it down, and I'm not backing down. You've lied to me, and now it's time for you to face the consequences. There was a moment of silence, then the sound of my dad's voice, low and almost threatening. You think you're the one who's in control here? You think you can just throw away everything we've done for you? If you don't take the post down, we'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you really are. You'll lose everything, Tara. Your career, your reputation, everything. My stomach churned as the weight of his words settled on me. You'll lose everything. The threat was unmistakable. He was trying to scare me into silence, trying to make me second-guess myself. And for a moment, I felt a flicker of fear. But then I remembered why I had started this. Why I had made the decision to confront them. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't even about the company. It was about taking back control of my life, taking back my dignity. I've already lost everything, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I've lost my trust in you, my trust in this family, and I'm not going to let you manipulate me anymore. I could hear the fury building in his voice. You're making a mistake. You don't know who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, I replied, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. I'm done being afraid of you. You've controlled everything for too long, but not anymore. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when he spoke again, his voice was tight with anger. You've sealed your fate, Tara. You've made your bed. Now you'll lie in it. The call ended abruptly, and I sat there staring at my phone, my heart still racing. I hadn't expected him to threaten me like this, not directly. But the anger I had felt earlier was now replaced with something else. Clarity. They could try to scare me. They could try to ruin me. But they would never break me. I sat down at the kitchen table, feeling the weight of the decision I had made all over again. But this time, the weight felt lighter. I had taken my power back, and no matter what they did, they couldn't take that from me. A knock at the door broke me from my thoughts. I stood up quickly, a little startled by the sudden sound. When I opened the door, it was Uncle Michael and Grandma standing there, their expressions serious but determined. You're okay? Uncle Michael asked, stepping inside. I nodded, though I knew he could see right through me. I'm fine, just got off the phone with Dad. He let out a breath, his gaze softening. I'm proud of you, Tara. You've got the strength in you to finish this. Thanks, I said quietly. But I'm not sure what comes next. They're not going to stop. They're going to fight dirty, and I'm not sure if I'm ready for what's coming. Grandma sat down beside me, her presence steady and reassuring. You've already done more than most people would ever dare, she said, her voice full of wisdom. But you don't have to do this alone. We're all in this with you. I know, I said, a lump forming in my throat. But it's hard to keep going when you feel like you're losing everything, when you realize just how deep the lies go. We all have our moments of doubt, Grandma said softly, but you're doing the right thing, you're doing what's needed. I smiled, a little watery, but it was genuine. I'm scared, Grandma. Scared of what will happen if I don't back down. Scared of what will happen if I do. She nodded. Fear is a part of this, Tara. But remember, the hardest thing is always the first step. You've already taken it, the rest will follow. That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of everything seemed to press in on me. But I no longer felt helpless. I felt a surge of determination. They had threatened me, tried to make me feel small, but I wasn't backing down. This fight had already cost me something, but it wasn't going to take away my resolve. I would stand tall, no matter what. The storm was here, but I was ready. The days stretched on, each one bringing new challenges, new threats, and a growing sense of inevitability. I could feel the storm brewing, the final confrontation with my family looming ever closer. Every time I picked up my phone, my heart skipped a beat, waiting for another call from my parents or worse, another threat. But through it all, I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going to back down. Uncle Michael and Grandma remained by my side, offering support when I needed it most. They had both seen the worst of what was coming. They had warned me that my parents wouldn't let this go without a fight, but I hadn't fully understood the extent of their anger until I received the next call. It was 2 weeks after the meeting in the cafe. My parents had remained quiet, but the tension was palpable. I could feel their presence lurking in the background, their influence still hanging over me like a shadow. Then, one evening, my phone rang again. This time, the number was unfamiliar. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed accept. "Tara," my dad's voice came through, low and controlled, a stark contrast to the fury of our last conversation. "We need to talk face to face." I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the phone. I had expected this, but hearing his voice, so calm, so collected, was unsettling. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady but laced with unease. "We're not going to let you ruin everything, Tara," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "But we can still fix this. You don't have to go through with the legal action. You don't have to make this public." For a moment, I was speechless. The calmness in his voice felt like a trap. It was as if he was trying to lure me back in, to make me believe that everything could be fixed if I just stopped fighting. But I knew better. "No," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to let you manipulate me anymore. You've been lying to me, using me for years. I can't just turn away from that." My dad let out a heavy sigh, the sound filled with frustration. "Tara, you don't know what you're doing. You think you're helping, but all you're doing is destroying everything we've built. This isn't just about money, this is about family. You're tearing us apart." The words stung, but they didn't have the same power they once did. "You've already torn us apart," I said, my voice stronger now. "You and Mom, you've been tearing us apart for years, but I'm done letting you. I'm done pretending everything's fine." There was a long silence, and for a moment I thought the call had ended. But then he spoke again, his voice colder than before. "You'll regret this, Tara," he said, his voice thick with a mixture of anger and something darker. Resentment, perhaps, or fear. "If you go through with this, if you destroy everything we've built, you'll never be able to come back. There will be no turning back from this." "I don't want to turn back," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "I've made my decision." The line went dead, and I sat there, staring at my phone, the weight of his words still pressing on me. I knew it was coming, the final battle. I had known that once I stepped into the light, once I exposed the truth, there would be no going back. But somehow, despite the fear, despite the threats, I felt a sense of clarity. The truth was no longer something to hide from. It was something to embrace. The next morning we filed the lawsuit. Uncle Michael and Sarah had worked tirelessly to prepare for this moment. They had everything in order: bank statements, photos, emails, each piece of evidence carefully documented, ready to be presented in court. It was clear now. My parents had no more cards to play. The truth was on our side, and there was nothing they could do to change that. The courtroom was cold and impersonal, filled with the usual buzz of legal proceedings. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I took a seat, glancing nervously at the empty chair beside me. Grandma, Uncle Michael, and Sarah were all there, but my parents, my mom and dad, were nowhere to be seen. A few minutes later, the doors to the courtroom opened, and my parents walked in. My mom's face was pale, her eyes narrowed in something close to contempt, while my dad's expression was hard, his jaw clenched tightly. They were trying to hold it together, but I could see the cracks, the fear hidden beneath their stone-cold exteriors. They sat down across from me, but I didn't look away. I couldn't. For years I had let them control the narrative, I had let them shape my life. But not anymore. I was standing in my truth, and nothing they could say or do would change that. The trial began, and the evidence was presented. One by one, the documents were laid out on the table, clear, irrefutable proof of what they had done. The withdrawals from my trust fund, the stolen money, the lies, and as the evidence piled up, my parents' defense grew weaker. They tried to deny it, of course, but their denials rang hollow. The truth was undeniable. I watched them carefully, my gaze never faltering. My mom tried to maintain her composure, but I could see the cracks in her armor. The moment the photos of the family cruise were displayed on the screen, Her eyes flickered with something. Guilt, perhaps, or shame. But she didn't say a word. And then it was my turn to speak. I stood up slowly, my hands trembling slightly, but my heart steady. I had practiced this moment in my mind so many times, but now that I was here, it felt different. This was real. This was the culmination of everything I had gone through, everything I had fought for. I didn't want this, I began, my voice filling the room. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to expose my family to the world. But you left me no choice. For years, I've been the one who took care of Grandma. I've been the one who did everything right, and all I ever got in return was neglect, manipulation, and betrayal. I looked at my parents, my heart heavy with a mixture of anger and sadness. You lied to me. You used me. You took my money, my trust, and you spent it all on yourselves, on Emma. And I've been silent for so long, pretending it didn't hurt, pretending it didn't matter. But it does matter. It matters to me, and it matters to the person I'm becoming. There was a long silence as I let my words sink in. The courtroom was still, everyone watching as I spoke my truth. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, I said, my voice strong, because I don't need it. What I need is to be free, to finally be free of the lies, and I'm done being controlled by you. With those words I sat down. The trial continued, but I felt something shift inside me. The fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time I felt like I was finally on the path to something bigger than all of this. To freedom, to my own life. Later, as I walked out of the courthouse, I could hear the voices of my family behind me, but they were fading. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying their weight, I was carrying my own. And I was ready for whatever came next. The storm had broken, and with it, a new beginning.